Good afternoon, good morning everybody. Welcome to today's quick live session where we're going to edit a quick architectural shot, I guess I will call it, which you will see in a minute. Don't forget that if you want to download this file, you can. It's in the description on Facebook or on YouTube, wherever you're watching. Don't forget to say hello and let us know where you're watching from. So you can always follow along later on and try to copy the edits, or of course use your own style as well. So let's take a look at the shot and see what we're looking at. So on the right is what I was playing around with earlier, and you can see on the left as it came out of camera. So we're going to do a little bit of straightening, perspective correction, not fully though, because then it looks a bit strange. Oh, excuse me. And also we've got a few artifacts and things to get rid of in the bottom left hand corner as well. So the main reason for using this shot was to try and kind of stretch what cloning could do and healing to some extent, and it was also a nice challenge for the perspective as well. So let's get started. So I'm going to go back to the unedited one. Let's just hide the browser just so that we've got a bit more screen real estate. I'm also going to hide the viewer labels as well, just because they're a little bit distracting, and then we can start editing. And any questions, of course, do feel free to pop them into Facebook and YouTube. I know YouTube's struggling with some issues today, so if you do have any breakups on YouTube or whatever, I know they're down over the US and part of Europe, so you can always hop over to Facebook and watch there as well. Cool. All right, so first things first, let's excuse me, fix our perspective. So I'm going to grab the keystone tool at the top here. Gives us 4 points, which we then just need to align on our error. So we're just going to match the perspective error on either side of the church. So let's do that. Now, the further out you can get these, the more accurate it likely is to be your correction. So if you're trying to correct something in the center of the shot, you need to be much more accurate than if you were on the outside as well. So let's say apply, and then Capture One will do its best to straighten it. Now for me, it's starting to look a little bit unrealistic. It's had to do a lot of correction to do so. But the good news is we can actually go to our keystone tool, and by default the amount of correction is 80, so 80%. It's not 100 because again, when we correct to 100%, then it looks really unnatural. But I think because this is such a big imposing building, it doesn't make sense to correct it this much. I just want to correct it a little bit. So I'm going to take the amount down until it looks kind of a bit more realistic like that. So now if I go to my cropping tool, that's what we've ended up with. Now, is it straight? I think it's pretty straight. Let's just put on a guide. So you can shortcut this, but sometimes guides are quite handy for architecture. So if I grab the pointer cursor tool, then I can just have a little sneaky look. Let's zoom in and then check how we're doing for our angle. It's actually pretty good, I think. Sometimes it's just easier to sit back and eye it in, but I think if anything, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to rotation, then to just jog the rotation a little bit, we can just tap down on the cursor keys, and I think I'm going to stick with that. Great. So a partial keystone correction, not a full keystone correction, for the reasons mentioned. Now, before we get on to do any editing, we've got this kind of annoying flaggy thing over here, and also a sign as well, which we want to get rid of. So first of all, I'm going to tackle this flag. So I'll zoom in a bit closer just for you guys so you can see what's going on. So I'm going to try this with the clone tool first of all, because the brickwork is pretty even in terms of its color and tone. So I think if I can just copy a patch over here to there, then we should be all right. So I say should. In the file that you can download, it's actually an EIP format, which has adjustments. So you can see the heal and cloning layers as well. It did take me a couple of times earlier to get it spot on. So if I don't get it exactly right, you can also check it in the EIP file. Now, choosing my clone brush over here, going to right click and make this a bit smaller and slightly harder. And when we're cloning, we first have to pick our source point. So we have to tell Capture One where we want to copy some pictures from. So to do that, hold down your Alt key. Notice this changes to a cross. And then I'm going to pick somewhere just around here. And I'm going to pick on this line where the brickwork changes, so that when I go over to this point, I know where to start off, if you like. I might have to jog it a little bit. So let's go to there. And then now I'm going to start to clone in around this point. Now right click, let's check my flow amount needs to be up fully. So now I'm just going to patch in a bit of this brickwork like so. Now if it's not exactly spot on, we can adjust the source point a little bit. I'm just going to be careful when I get to the archway. So let's make my brush a little bit harder and a bit smaller. And let's just get rid of this bit. Now you see I've ended up with a little bit of that archway, but that's no matter. What I can do is just move this across a bit until that goes away. And then if I zoom into 100%, we can see, sorry, we're already zoomed into 100%. It's actually from 100%, it actually looks pretty good. But if we go back to where we are, grab my clone brush, I'm going to select this point so I can see that it's orange. And then what I'm going to do is just use my cursor keys up and down, and that will move my source point a tiny bit. So if I just keep clicking my cursor keys, helps if I actually select it properly. So let's, whoops, sorry, wrong fingers and thumbs today. So now if I use my cursor keys, you can see it's moving up and down. So what I need to do now is just go back to this point, use my cursor key, and then go down a little bit, one more perhaps, and there we go. That's a much better fit of the brickwork. It's always a bit of a telltale sign when we've got bricks if it doesn't match perfectly. So let's get rid of the bottom of the rest of the flag. Hopefully I can do that from the same clone point. So let's make sure I select this one. And then let's see, I might have to pick another spot if it doesn't match him very well. Now you see the issue here is that we've got two bricks kind of in the wrong place. So that doesn't look great. So what I'm going to do is choose my erase, make this a bit smaller, just with the right click, and take this bit out just till the bottom of that brick line, and then we will choose another clone point which I hope will do a slightly better job. So back to my clone brush, and now I'm going to pick which brick, probably this one. So if I option click over here, that's going to choose this as my clone of my source point. And remember, you can have multiple source points on the layer. So now if I start brushing over here, then hopefully this might be a bit more convincing. Not too bad. If I finish that line down there and get rid of that one, then we could be in good shape. Now I could fiddle around a little bit. I might just move this down a bit. So if I've got it selected, I can use my cursor keys once more and just shift that up a tiny bit like so. Pretty good. Now we're zoomed into 300% for your benefit, so that's not super realistic. So if we zoom into 100% and look at our before and after, then I think that's pretty good. So not too bad at all. I'm just checking if anyone's asked any questions. Art was asking, what's the camera setup for these? Good question. I didn't shoot this. This was shot by my colleague Serge. So this is shot with Sigma 2470, Canon EOS 60. There you go. So, but otherwise I can't give you much more information, Art, to be honest, but that's the camera in use. All right, let's get rid of this annoying sign over here. Again, I'll zoom in a bit closer for you guys. Let's grab the heel brush, make this a bit smaller. I'm going to try healing for this one and see how Capture One does. So let's just pop that out. Not bad. And then I'm just going to move this source point down a little bit so it matches up nicely. Great. Now I don't want to move him because he actually looks quite cool in the shot, but what I might do is just take out, say there's a manhole cover down here, so let's go back to my healing brush and let's take that out as well. So just a little bit of that. Perfect. Nice. So that's cleaned up our artifacts a little bit. So what about the actual editing of the shot? So it's actually pretty good out of camera. So let's go to my background layout. What I do want to do is just enhance the contrast a bit, because just to see a bit more in that nice building and so on. And also for the clarity, we'll do the same, but just if I push that, you can see the difference it's making. So that's more of like a mid-tone contrast. So my shadows aren't getting too dark and nasty, but it's just adding some nice effects. Now zooming in carefully, so we've got lots of nice architectural details, which is a good case for using structure as well. Now we've got to be careful with structure not to push it too hard, because otherwise we just get kind of nasty artifacts. So if we push structure too much, then we're going to get an over sharpening effect. But if we just be sympathetic, we can bring that up a little bit. It'll make all that nice detail and brickwork pop. Wood on the doors, we've got the markings on the parking area in front and so on. Just makes that all crisp up and stand out a bit better as well. So structure, great. It's kind of similar to sharpening, but a bit more sledgehammer. So that's why you need to be careful, just to kind of crisp up edges. So it's good for this kind of example we're looking at. It's good for landscapes. It's good for animal fur, those kinds of things, wildlife, feathers, and so on. Just use it with a little bit of care as well. Okay, actually it's looking still a bit wonky to me, so I might just bring my rotation a bit more like so. That's better. Maybe I'm seeing things, but I think it just didn't look quite straight. So how are we doing so far? Let's look at before after. Notice the before and after, it won't change the compositional aspect, so we're not going to see the change of our keystone because that would be hard to compare, but you can see our edits and the removal of that flag in the corner as well. Now, last few things that I want to do. I like the wood paneling, but it's kind of a little bit dark, and I wouldn't mind being able to make him stand out a bit more and also just kind of get a bit more detail going on in the kind of marks at the foreground. So let's deal with him a little bit first. And also I might like to brighten selectively, so dodge in a few areas as well, just to kind of get a bit more detail. So I'm going to make a new field adjustment layer, and we're going to call this lighten, like so. And the reason we're filling it, if I press M on the keyboard, I just want to play with my curves first. And the reason why I'm using curves is that it's just going to change my luminosity and it's not going to affect the color or saturation. So we're going to go down to the curves tool, which is closed up down here. And we're going to use a luma curve. And I kind of want to brighten these areas. So on the sides here and also down here, where it's already slightly different in tone. I just want to enhance it a bit more. So you see where I'm hovering my cursor, we get the little orange line dancing around on the curve. So that's the kind of tone I'm looking to change. So I'm just going to pull up this a little bit, and it's affecting the whole shot, but we're going to selectively just put that or brush that in where we want to. So now I'm going to go back to my layer, and we're just going to right click and say clear mask. So that will get rid of my mask, but it's kept my curve adjustment, which I can now brush that back in. So if I grab my brush cursor tool, let's make it a bit softer, line a little bit smaller, and we're going to turn the flow down, so this is going to let us build up the adjustment slowly. The lower the flow, the longer it takes to reach my maximum opacity. So I'm just going to brighten this little bit in the middle here, going to brighten these kind of pillars like so. So it's very gradual at the moment. If I press M, you'll just about be able to see the mask like so. And I'm going to kind of brighten this little triangle area to some extent too. And if we go down to our fella in the front here, let's see if we can just lift him a little bit as well. Let's see, so I'm just going to kind of almost like brighten behind him a little bit, just so his silhouette is a bit stronger as well, like so. Now it's quite subtle, so if we turn this lighten layer off, then we can see before and after, but he's now a little bit obvious against that dark background. Okay, I'm just having a pause for a quick couple of questions. That's a good question, Shane, actually. Can you extend the tar so there's space in front, i.e. content aware? You can't do a content aware, but what you can do, if we go to the crop tool, let's turn on the crop. So right now, if I say crop outside image, what we can do is extend that a little bit more as well. Now, you know what, Shane, I've never tried it by actually trying to fill in the space outside of the crop. I don't even know if Capture One can do that. Shall we try? I'm gonna see if I look like an idiot now. So the reason for crop outside the image is that it allows us to extend the crop when we've done a heavy perspective correction like so. But I'm not sure if Capture One can actually clone outside that area, but I'm willing to give it a try. So let's say I'm going to give it a new clone layer. Let's call this tar for Shane's idea. Grab the clone tool. Let's make this a bit bigger. I'm going to just option click over here to grab this. Can I brush outside this area? No, I can't. So now we know, Shane, but that could be an interesting thing that we could add later on, possibly, if it's technically possible. But Shane, if you did want to do that, then don't forget you have got your crop outside of image area available here, just to kind of give you that ability to add some content aware later on. But let's crop it out as we can't do that, but I will give myself a bit more tarmac like so. But that's a great question, Sean, definitely. Sean, Shane, great question, Shane, sorry. Okay, there was another question I saw as well. Sven says, when you use the clone tool, does it clone from the background or from the original clone part? It clones from the background, so it won't clone over your clone, if that makes sense, or a heel, for example. David says, on the brush setting, do you think you could put an S and an H one side to make it a little more clear as to what you were using? Yeah, that could be an idea, I guess. I haven't found it an issue myself because I think the brush icons are quite distinct. So I don't know if an S or an H would maybe makes much difference. But don't forget you could use your shortcut keys as well. So instead of choosing it here, if you think whenever I'm going to pick the brush, I'm going to use my shortcut key. In this case, the default is Q and S, except I've changed my defaults. So if we go to the default shortcuts or we type in clone, you can see we've got add new clone layer, display, heal and clone arrows. If we type in brush, then we've got our brush sizes. If we type heal, like so, draw healing mask and so on. So you can always set up the shortcut to what makes sense, like S and H, for example. Okay, I think, Miguel said, what about the sky? Is there any info in there? Don't know, actually. Good question. We'll have a look at that in 1 second. Let me just get my crop a bit more balanced again, and then we shall take a look. What I wanted to do first of all was the tarmac. That's right. So I'm going to make a new layer, and we're going to call this the tarmac in the front, and I'm just going to grab a gradient mask and just draw up from the bottom. It's going to be a little tiny gradient mask like that, and I don't want it to be symmetrical either side. I want it to have a slightly harder fall off so it doesn't affect the bottom of the church. So to do that, if we hold the Alt key down, then we can make it asymmetric. So I'm going to make it quite a hard fall off like so, and all I'm going to do here is just chuck in a bit more clarity and maybe just darken the brightness down a bit. And if we push up the whites and the highlights, then we just get a bit more in the paint as such, and push the blacks down and max clarity. So now if we turn that layer on and off, it's just darken that down a little bit and made it a bit more gritty, etc. Let's zoom in ever so slightly. So let's turn that off and back on like so. but hasn't affected my church, so that's all good. Sky, I don't know. Let's go back to the background. Let's see if there's, I think it's a typical overcast Danish day, so it's mostly grey. So you could go either way. You could have grey or you could have white. So probably not a great deal of colour information in there. If anything, it's a little bit on the blue side. We could put a tint in there with the colour balance tool. We could warm it up a bit if you prefer, or we could make it colder. Don't know, but no other sort of detail or textures or clouds or anything like that to make it stand out. Now, the last thing I want to do, and I think I can get away with this on the background, is that the doors are a bit dark. So I could do a couple of things. Let's go to my lighten layer, grab my brush, and then I can just brighten up this door a little bit. But we could also try with the color editor as well. So let's zoom in again to 100%. Let's go to the color editor, and I'm going to use advanced. The reason being is that I want to be a bit selective about the saturation range, because the brickwork and the wooden door are of similar color tone, but this is much more saturated from the brick. So if I'm lucky, I might be able to pick it out as a separate color tone to edit. So if we grab the picker and then let's pick on the door, this gives me a selected color range. Now this direction around the circle, that's the range of colors we're going to edit. And this direction, this is the saturation range. So right now we're editing all colors in that particular saturation range. Now, if I turn on view selected color range, you can see which part of the shot I'm going to edit. Now, anything that's not in my color range will be turned to black and white. So if I hopefully squeeze this down, what I might be able to do is cut out the brickwork, which I can, but keep the door and a little bit of the bricks around it. That's fine. So that would be the entire range. This would be just my door, like so. So now if I turn off view selected color range, I could make the doors just a bit brighter. Oops, helps if you get the slider. So I exaggerate, you can make them a bit brighter, but it's not affecting the bricks so much. So I'm going to lighten them up a touch. Let's zoom out so you can see what's going on, or to 50%. So I'm just going to lighten them up a little bit and add a bit more saturation in those as well, like so. Fabulous. I think for me that pretty much does it. Let's go through our layer stack. Let's make our layers tool a bit bigger. So let's go to 50% so you can see better what's going on. So we had our clone layer, getting rid of that annoying flag. And then we had the heel layer, which got rid of this little sign down here. So the heel layer just got rid of that quite nicely. Oh, and our manhole cover at the front. And then lighten. Let's zoom out 2 spots. Lighten just brightened up some of the architectural features, just to give it a bit more contrast. And then tarmac was just to get a bit more contrast in the front, like so. Now, if you remember the original, let's do a new variant. So which one did we edit? It was this one, I think, wasn't it? Yep. So let's put those side by side. So that's what we ended up with on the left, and then this is how we started. So quite a lot of pushing and pulling of the photo, but plenty of pixels that can cope with that. If we look at both of these at 100%, so that's the original, that's the adjusted. So even though we did quite a big skew with the keystone correction, it's not like we're losing tons of image quality. And the addition of that structure as well and clarity has just sharpened everything up super nicely as well. So let's have a look at some questions. Is it possible to clean up the tarmac or the face of the building using frequency separation? Rick, you'd have to ask a Photoshop expert for that, because I am very naive, or at least early on in the potential with frequency separation. You probably could. Whether you'd want to artistically or not is another thing, but frequency separation is pretty powerful if used with a careful hand, for sure. Is there a way to expand the search box upper right? Oh, in the browser? If you have your browser bigger, then yes, it will expand out, as you can see, like so. So if you can't see it, it's just because we've run out of screen real estate on the right hand side, like so. Can I change the key for making the brush larger or smaller? Yes, so really any shortcut you can change. So the best way to do it is go to Edit Keyboard Shortcuts. So you wanted to change the brush size. So if we type in brush, so we've got increase, decrease, size, hardness, opacity, and flow. So you can simply choose whatever you like. So yes, it does work. Could we make the doors more detailed? Yeah, we could. I would just put in an additional, sharpening or structure possibly, if there's enough information there. But with our lighten layer, just imagine that this was just, I think there's a little bit on the door, a touch, so we could add some more structure with that as well. I'm just pushing it to the extremes. So you could do a similar thing, yes. Let's see. When is it useful to change? Oh, that's a big question. The curve in base characteristics, I never use it. There's not much call to actually use it. Essentially, this is your starting point for your raw edit. Now the default is film standard, so when it's set to auto, it's using the curve that was used to create the profile of the camera in Capture One. Now the reason why it says auto is that for another version of Capture One that deals with capturing artwork, historical artifacts and things, we have a whole bunch more curves for different light sources like LED and so on and so forth. So auto just makes sure that the right curve is picked that was used to create the profile. So film standard is what you're seeing. If you prefer to start flatter, you can pick this. If you always find you're adding contrast, you can pick this. Or for a super flat version, you can pick this, but care required to get the best out of it. But generally for 99% of image work, it's absolutely fine leaving it on auto. Okay, let's see. Nick says, you're late. Better late than never, Nico. Let's see. Last question, and then we will let you go about on your days. Can we edit locally on selected colors? That's a great question to finish up with. So yes, and in actual fact, I didn't spot it when I was doing it on this particular occasion, but if we look at our background color edit, so what I did, so if I just pull the lightness around, so it is affecting maybe a little bit too much at the extreme ends. So what we could do, let's actually delete our color edit. So I'm just going to reset our color edit. Let's go to one of the doors. Let's make a new layer and call this door. Oops, helps if we say plus, first of all. What was that one? Let's go here and say door, like so. And I'm just going to do this nice and quick. Let's grab a brush, full flow. Let's make it a little bit softer. And let's just paint in our doorway. So if we press M, you can see the mask. Not going to be super accurate, but let's roughly paint in the doorway, like so. Press E for erase, going to make you a little bit bigger and just take out that bit there. So we've got our doorway selected. So now if I pick my doorway color once more, not even going to bother editing this, because now if we sneak a look at this door and we change lightness, see it's only affecting that selection. So that's, if you can't, manipulate your color range enough, then that's another way to be able to play. So let's up the saturation, and we could do what Keith wanted. We could also add a little bit of extra structure and clarity in this one as well, like so. So yes, you can absolutely do that, and that was a really great question to tie up with, because it just makes the color editor so much more powerful as well. Okay, Eric, what's the difference between heal and clone? Clone's a direct copy of pixels, so no change in luminous brightness or nothing, and you manually have to select the source point. The heal layer will match the luminosity on the area you're trying to heal to blend in better, and it will automatically pick the source point for you. So that's really the two main differences. Alrighty, so thanks everyone for joining today. Don't forget, if you want to try and edit this photo as well, it's in there's a download for it in the description. It's an EIP type file, which means it's packed with adjustments. So when you import into Capture One, you'll see some adjustments I made yesterday. It's not identical to this one. I can never edit a shot identically the same twice, but it will give you an idea of the different heal layer and clone layer and edits and so on and so forth. So go ahead, download that and give that a try. On Thursday, if you want to come back for a longer session, then we're digging into, funnily enough, sessions. So file management for Capture One, but using the session file management, which is unique to Capture One. So you can find that webinar and other webinars upcoming on learn.captureone.com. So learn.captureone.com to find all the upcoming webinars, and then on our Facebook page, on the events page, we also list all upcoming events there by us and also our partners as well. So thanks again. Hope you found that useful. It just goes to show what you can do with the raw file in terms of pulling pixels around, not only with the keystone correction, but with heal and clone tools as well. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday and see you all later. Bye now.